Thanks, Ronnie. Now, since the credit crunch struck 4 years ago, getting loans from banks has become hard, if not impossible, for many. That's helped fuel an explosion in payday lending, short-term loans offered at huge rates of interest. Even worse, some have turned to unlicensed lenders who demand extortionate repayments, often with threats and violence. Loan sharks have become such a big problem that there are now specially trained consumer cops who track down the illegal lenders and, where possible, prosecute. Our reporter, Louise Hulland, is in Liverpool.
Yes, it may be hard to believe, but the number of UK households using loan sharks is now believed to be upwards of 300,000. Here on Merseyside, they have their share of lenders operating outside the law. And a little later, I'll show you what happened when the illegal money lending team targeted one suspect in a dawn raid. But first, we've been finding out just how ruthless loan sharks can be and learning about the misery they can cause.
You have 9 saved messages. First saved message.
I'm just about sick and tired of your mate. Now you owe me £3,700, mate. And you better have some money, mate.
Menacing and intimidating, the voice of a loan shark demanding payment from one of his victims. A man operating outside the law, charging eye-watering levels of interest.
A loan shark technically is somebody who hasn't got a consumer credit licence, but actually a loan shark is a lot more than that. They're a criminal who fundamentally goes out to rip people off and make their lives a misery. Loan sharks are in it purely for the money. They're not there to provide any sort of community service. They're not there to actually lend money responsibly. They're not there to help anybody out. It's purely greed. It's criminal activity linked to greed.
Jackie Kennedy oversees the work of the National Illegal Money Lending Team. Over the last 8 years, she's witnessed the sharks' tactics up close.
Loan sharks will regularly leave threatening voicemails, and those are typical. The ranting, the swearing, the bad language, the intimidation, the threats.
This is the second time I've rung you. I was expecting you to ring me back. So expect us up tomorrow. If you don't ring me, pal, I'll tell you.
Complete power relationship, completely trying to frighten the person who's picked up the voicemail. That is, I'm afraid, typical of how a lot of loan sharks operate. We've had people kidnapped from the streets, we've had threats to kill, we've had children taken from school, we've had animals kidnapped, we've had people raped associated to loans. Their impact is disproportionate. On a community or on an individual or on a family. It's massive, and they've got to be stopped.
But stopping the sharks isn't easy. Officers rely on victims putting their fears aside, then coming forward with information. Victims like Mike.
It all started when I just turned 17, wanted a car, and he was known to everybody in the area as being the person to get cars from. He was a friend of the family as well. My wife went to school with him. So, obviously, being a friend, that's the best people to go to, you'd think. I bought the car off him for £250, and it started off where I was just paying him £30 a week. After a couple of weeks, the payments increased, he wanted more. And then a couple of weeks later, he wanted more. It went from 30 to 50 to 60 to 70. Then because obviously I was using money to pay him instead of buying food and gas, electric, paying the rent, I then had to lend more money off him to cover them, and he'd chuck interest on top, and if I couldn't pay him 1 week, he'd double what I owe him, and it just spiralled out of control.
So many people are embarrassed that they've got into debt with a loan shark, and so many people are intimidated and frightened as well. Mike's not untypical really of somebody. They don't actually come to the team until they're absolutely at the end of the tether.
He was going to hit us or start taking stuff out of the house, which he did do. Took kids' PlayStations, took any console we got for them. He took a car off us, and there was one occasion where I was ill. I was on the settee, and he just started laying into me in front of my kids.
He borrowed £250, and after 17 years, I think he'd repaid something like £90,000. an astounding amount of money.
I was always stressed. I was working all the hours God sent, doing 2 jobs, like for 2-3 hours a day, living on Mars bars, just to get the money to pay him. We lost a house. Me and my wife, because we lost the house, because we didn't have the money, we were always arguing, splitting up. I mean, I had a heart attack because of all the stress, I couldn't pay him. I lost 2 jobs at the same time. Everything was a result of the loan shark. It just wasn't a life.
I think Mike had just come to the end of the road, really. He'd considered committing suicide several times. He knew his family, he couldn't give them holidays, and he suddenly realised that, you know, this can't go on.
It come to a point where he wasn't just threatening me, he was threatening my wife, threatening my kids, and that was the final straw.
What was amazing is just how brave and courageous he was to actually finally, after all that time, I think about 17, 18 years, to actually think, enough's enough, and I've got nothing but praise for Mike and the other victims that have come forward and given evidence against people who are basically bullies, operate through power and control, and are fundamentally criminals.
Once I sat down and worked it out with the loan shark team, I'd actually be paid around about £90,000 over the period of 17 years. 17 years of sheer hell.
Jackie and her colleagues did track down the man who terrorised Mike, and although he was later prosecuted and jailed, there are plenty of others just like him, and they're still out there.
I think it's a big problem, and it's a big problem nationally. I think we are really starting to make an impact, and we've prosecuted over 200 loan sharks, which is fantastic. We've secured custodial sentences of about 134 years. We've written off over £40 million of debt. So it is a significant problem. But what we're trying to do is raise awareness. We're trying to get communities more empowered to avoid falling into the hands of loan sharks.
Runcorn, home to around 61,000 people, an industrial town with high unemployment and a known haunt of unlicensed moneylenders, which is why today officers are leafleting its estates.
It's been targeted in the past by loan sharks. We've done a lot of work on this estate trying to make sure people don't use loan sharks in the future. But it does tend to be quite close-knit communities who borrow from loan sharks, which gives us a problem in terms of enforcement because people don't want to come forward, don't want to talk about it, but also gives the loan shark a real in because they're part of the community that they're lending to.
The leaflets not only warn residents of the dangers of borrowing from loan sharks, they ask those with information about them to come forward, which isn't always easy.
There's a massive fear factor about being seen as a grass in that community. And I think as well, people have no idea this is an illegal activity. They've no idea that Brian down the pub, who's lending everybody money on the estate, needs a licence to do so. Sometimes a leaflet through the door is just what it takes for people to think, hang on a minute, this sounds like my circumstance, this sounds like me. We offer a 24/7 service, so quite often my team are dealing with calls in the evenings, dealing with people at weekends because they're scared, because they've got concerns about court, because they think they've seen some car following them down the street, and most of the time they haven't. It's just that they've been living in fear for that long.
Any family member or any member of the public that's come forward and actually stood up and been counted is very brave and courageous, and they are the people that are making the difference. And when we first launched this project, everybody said people wouldn't come to court, but they do, and they know when enough is enough, and they stand up and get counted, and that is fantastic. We couldn't do it without them.
It was a tip-off from a brave member of the public that led to Jackie and her team tracking down this loan shark, Winston Mills, who for at least 5 years terrorised those who owed him money.
He used to take their post office cards and intimidate them into repayment.
One set of victims targeted by Mills were a group of vulnerable adults, all living in the same block of flats in Manchester.
One of his victims' relatives actually brought him to our attention and told us how he operated.
Armed with this information, trading standards officers were able to track Mills's movements, gathering evidence of how he collected his payments.
You can see from that CCTV footage that clearly the loan shark is completely in control. that woman has gone, she's collected her benefits, she's actually collected her benefits and her mum's benefits. He's taken all of the money and given her one note back. Clearly the evidence that we presented, including the CCTV, resulted in the judge actually saying that this was clearly ruthless exploitation of the vulnerable, and I share his view.
Mills was later sentenced to 14 months in prison, a criminal off the streets, a loan shark no longer able to bully and intimidate the vulnerable. 6 a.m. and it's an early start for Tony Quigley from the National Illegal Money Lending Team.
Yeah, this morning we're going to a property in Merseyside. We're executing a warrant. We've got information of a potential illegal money lender that has been operating.
It's a bigger operation than usual, with 9 members of the team on site, along with police backup.
We'll have officers that are that will be there to secure the initial entry, and then we'll have search teams that will be there to search the rooms. We know that the evidence with illegal money lenders can be obscured in the most unlikely places, and they'll be experienced to know the sort of places where information like this can be hidden. The one thing is that, you know, we never know how the records are being kept of the loans. It can be anything from a scrap of paper to well-documented books.
Any suspicious items will be removed for further investigation. Any evidence of loan sharking will almost certainly result in arrest and later prosecution.
Loan sharking is right up there with some of the most hideous forms of criminality, because the people that they target are particularly vulnerable, and you know, I don't care what anybody says. You know, when people say, "Oh, well, it's just a community service," it isn't. These people are all about profiteering and extortion, and that's what we see day in, day out. And some of the stories that we hear of the way that people have been taken advantage of, it's really sad. It's a sad indictment of what this activity is all about. It's all about control. It's all about power, it's all about bullying, and it's all about profiteering on the backs of people who can least afford it.
When the team are in position, 2 police officers approach the suspect's property.
At the moment, obviously there's no answer, so potentially we're considering whether to enter the property by force.
One of the officers heads round the back of the house. After 10 minutes, still no answer. Either no one is in, or someone is inside and doesn't want to answer. In accordance with the warrant, the team decide to enter by force. The house is, in fact, occupied, and the suspect claims not to have heard the officers at the door. It's now time for Tony's team to get to work.
We've got a suspect in the house at the moment, and we're going to see whether or not we find any evidence of what's been going on, and then potentially, if any evidence is found, then there may be, you know, maybe arrests later on in the day.
After an hour of searching the property, the suspect is taken away for questioning. For the next 2 hours, Tony's team conducts a painstaking search of the house.
They're searching each room methodically, one by one, and any potential evidence that they're finding is being what we call bagged and tagged. And there's certainly some bits of interest that has currently been seized and will be taken away.
As well as the property, the suspect's car is also searched. And after 3 hours of meticulous investigation, Tony and his team emerge with evidence, including paperwork and various electronic items, such as mobile phones.
Normally the evidence will shine through if they've been carrying on illegal activity. So from our perspective, I think it's gone really well today, but it's going to be a long day, and there's going to be tired officers at the end of it.
This is really the beginning of the investigation, just one of many operations to rid the streets of loan sharks. Well, I'm here with Tony Quigley now, who we saw leading that operation. Tony, have you got any updates for us?
Yeah, the suspects are currently on bail and the team are carrying out further inquiries. We won't be in a position to make a decision on what action, if any, should be taken until we've got all the information in front of us. And then we'll decide and make an informed choice of what is the most appropriate action that we should take. Now,
we've seen that a lot of your job, a really important part, is building awareness that loan sharks are operating. How can we spot a loan shark and avoid falling into their trap?
I think one of the main attributes of a loan shark is the fact that normally it's through word of mouth. Then there's no paperwork, and also they keep full control of what's happening. So we've seen loan sharks that can charge hundreds of thousands of % on a very small bill that becomes out of control very quickly. So in terms of if you're currently within or have a debt to somebody, you're unsure about whether or not they're a loan shark, contact the team, because debts to loan sharks are unenforceable. And we see occasions where the loan shark will cause fear and intimidation to try and enforce that debt.
And if someone knows that they are in debt to a loan shark, how can they get help?
Then we would ask them to ring the team, speak to an investigator. We'll support you through the process. That's what we're here for. We're here to stop the loan sharks, but we need the help from the public. We need them to be brave enough to pick up the phone, to speak to one of our officers, and we will help them through that process. It's important because these loan sharks profiteer on the backs of some of the most vulnerable members of our community, and that's what it is. It's profiteering, it's extortion. So pick up the phone, give the team a ring, and we'll help and support you through.
And if you are in debt to a loan shark and you do need some help, the information that you need will be on screen now. That's great, Tony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.